Wow. Baroque VTuber debut for real. So, earlier today, I put out a poll for all of you to respond to. And I asked something along the lines of, would you rather me, for the wonderful series of Power Rangers soundtrack remakes, would you rather that I either use OG samples or just continue doing what I'm doing with modern sample libraries, or the other answer being, Baroque, what are you talking about? And yeah, I probably haven't explained this that much, and maybe this isn't really something that most people would encounter unless they work in the world of orchestral composition or just music composition in general. But I'm going to explain to you today exactly what I'm talking about, why maybe one option's better than the other. I may or may not have already decided. I'm giving you the illusion of choice. It's good. It's good, you know, it's a nice thing to do. But this is a pretty crazy story. There is some lore to what I've discovered. Okay, let's just first have a little history lesson. Let me explain to you how orchestral music production basically works. Obviously, orchestral composition started a long time ago with wonderful composers who worked at their favourite instrument and came up with ideas, wrote them down on manuscript in front of them, and then you would hear them if you were lucky enough to attend a performance of that particular concert, and otherwise you would probably never hear it again unless you were a certain composer who'd like to revise his work multiple times. But we're not talking about Bach here, we're not. So, how does it work in the modern digital world? You're not writing on paper anymore, you're sending your score by email to people. It's a new world. It's a new wonderful world, and music, the way music is created, changed. We had, people make music on computers now, right? That's kind of a given. And while your wonderful film score was not necessarily, or should I say, not entirely made on a computer, once upon a time it was. Because once upon a time, your favorite composer had to create a MIDI mock-up. The wonderful process of creating a demo version of the score with the computer and orchestral sounds, orchestral samples on their computer. They'll make a sort of draft version of it, so then when the director comes in, they can be like, yo, check this out, and they'll probably be like, yeah, that's good, or maybe change this. And then, when everyone's happy with it, then you take it off to the orchestra and then they perform it, and you make loads of money, or you make no money at all. So composers don't often have the time or money to track down, a real orchestra to perform these handwritten scores. I mean, I don't know about you. I just don't have an entire symphonic orchestra lying about. I just don't. I don't know. I mean, maybe you do, lucky you, but I don't. I don't know. I don't think most people do. I'm pretty sure most people don't have an entire orchestra, hundreds of players just in their cupboard. No. It's not. That's just not the done thing. So companies began to. Well, they came up with something pretty clever. Companies realized that instead of having an orchestra, they could simply work with an orchestra, instructing them to record every single instrument separately at different dynamic levels, different notes, different playing styles, and then compiling these recordings or samples into sample libraries. So we are going to go back to the 80s, I don't know, there's background change or something, I don't know. Look, it's the 80s. So it's the 80s. You've got hardware units like Fairlight CMI, which kind of use sample technology that they are using recorded sounds which you can play on the keyboard. It's crazy, but nothing insanely good. Like, not like a full orchestra with every instrument meticulously recorded at different volumes and all that sort of stuff. It's like 87, 88, a company called ProSonus comes along. Not PreSonus, ProSonus. And they basically start packaging up recordings of percussion, brass, strings, woodwind, ensemble sounds, effects, keyboards, and they start selling them on CD. They come in CDs. You get ProSonus percussion on a single CD, and that's it. You buy it, and then you've got your full orchestral percussion, every drum you'll need just recorded, and you can put them in whatever you want and play them back, and then there you go. Now, the ProSonus samples found their way onto numerous other later products, and you wonderful Power Rangers fans may or may not, you better, recognize this particular sound called bowed cymbal 3. Yeah, if you don't recognize that, you should, because Leo Rosner used that 5 times every single episode, so for 5 years, you should know that sound. And if you don't, you are going to recognize it the next time you do a rewatch. You'll hear it and be like, oh damn, that's bowed cymbal 3 from ProSonus Percussion Volume 2. Damn, thanks Baroque for telling me that, and you are very welcome. So what about the difference between, say, a modern library like Spitfire Symphony Orchestra, or what I'm mostly using, East West Hollywood Orchestra, which is about a terabyte of content, compared to older libraries, the ProSonus CDs I mentioned, or some of the old Roland CDs. Most of the time they won't even reach 1 gig of content. They're tiny, I haven't actually done my homework and checked to see how big one of them was, but it's usually I think it's usually 500 megabytes. I'm making it up, but I think I've seen that number before somewhere. So, they're tiny is the point. They just don't have as much content. But having all of this content and everything, as said, there's just sometimes something missing that some of these older libraries had. Let's look at, just imagine the Time Force score. When you listen to my remakes, let's say Ransik's Last Stand, such a powerful bit of music, but when you listen to mine, it's just not as powerful, not really as good as the ones in the original version. They don't have that same ridiculous, heavy, slightly unrealistic, but really cool sounding, over the top, dramatic nature, right? They just don't have that. I guess that's kind of the point here. Do they sound better? Do they sound more realistic? No. Do they sound better? In this context, they absolutely do. And it's all because when you listen to those 2 tracks, when you listen to my remake of Ransik's Last Stand and you listen to the original, it's the power. There is so much more power in whatever Rosner and Zur were using. Power that might be a little bit unrealistic, but power nonetheless. So that begs the question. What the hell were they using? What were they using? I really am going to make a comprehensive video essay, or maybe series of video essays, covering absolutely everything that was used, all the synths and all the sample packs that we used to create the soundtrack of Time Force and Wild Force, maybe Lightspeed, maybe some others if I go back and do remakes of them. In the meantime, I do need to explain a little bit, so let me tell you a little story. So we're going to do another time skip. We just skipped back to the 80s. We haven't come back into the future yet, but either way, we're going to go forward to the 90s. Dramatic background change. Whoa, it's the 90s. Look at me, I fit right in. It's perfect. It's the decade many wonderful things happened and terrible things such as myself. The 90s. Hell yeah. Inon Zur and Leo Rosner were composing in a time when the best orchestral sample library around was a library called Peter Seidlacek's Advanced Orchestra, which came out, I think, 1997. And Miroslav Vitus Symphonic Orchestral Samples. Very catchy names, I know. That one came out in 1993. Now, the latter, Miroslav Vitus's library, that would have set you back a wonderful amount. A nice, generous $3,000. For context, East West Hollywood Orchestra in like 2015 cost me about £550. Like, yeah. A Spitfire Symphony Orchestra you can get on sale for £250. Like, $3,000? In the 90s, like, adjust it for inflation. What's the number? I don't know. I'm not going to do it. You do it. It's bigger than 3,000. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. I don't know how much Peter Seidlacek's Advanced Orchestra is. It came out a bit later, but I imagine it had a very similar price tag. Now, why don't we take a quick listen to one of my favourite cues from Time Force. It's the one I've called Wes vs. the Cyclobots as my remake. Let's take a listen to it with Peter Seidlacek's Advanced Orchestra. This is how the best thing money could buy at the time sounds with that music. Wow, that was... I mean,
it's alright, like...
$3,000. It's not even close to as good as Zur's mystery sample library was on that track, right? And yes, Inon Zur wrote that track, and the final battle with Rancic. They weren't credited to him, but they are absolutely his tracks. Just dropping that in there. So, if the best, most comprehensive orchestral sample library at the time sounded that weak, and just to be clear, Miroslav Vitus's samples were, to me, less realistic sounding as well. If they sounded that weak, then how the hell did what we heard on the show sound so good? Let me just play that particular scene for you. Just take a listen to the sheer power in those orchestral samples.
Into a vortex.
Thank you.
So that completely knocks Peter Seidlacek's Advanced Orchestra out of the park, right? That's a million times better. Night and day. So if they weren't using a real orchestra, and literally the best thing on the market doesn't sound good enough, and I've got a collection of like close to 200 sample CDs from the 90s. Nothing on the market sounded that good. How on earth did they achieve that? So this is where a very sketchy 4-volume sample CD library comes into the story, called Roland LA Composer. With a name like that, you'd naturally assume that this was a Roland product. But no, it wasn't. LA Composer was a set of 4 CDs titled Roland LA Composer Volume 1, 2, 3, and 4, containing a compilation of the best samples available at the time. Volume 1 had an entire orchestra, including harp, choir, piano, strings, brass, woodwind, percussion, there's organ, musical effects, like band instruments, guitars, drum kit, bass guitars, there's waterphone, the spooky horror movie bowing noise instrument thing, absolutely everything. Now these seem to have primarily originated from the aforementioned late 80s ProSonus CDs and from Roland CDs. Volume 2 was a complete copy of Roland Orchestral Family Volume 2, and it has stuff like weird vocal clips from old movies like Alice in Acidland and a loop of the titular song from Singing in the Rain, and guitar samples from Megadeth and Ozzy Osbourne. It's just a bunch of stuff basically at this point. Volume 3 is a bit more focused, I suppose. It has some better brass, woodwind, and extended techniques from woodwind and brass. All of these woodwind and brass samples are like better quality than the ones on Volume 1, but Volume 1 is like a sort of general purpose kind of here's everything if you just need to quickly come up with something. Volume 3 was kind of more like, hey, you're doing something a bit more technical with the woodwind and the brass. Here's some better quality stuff for you. But then we get Volume 4. Oh dear, this is where things get pretty wild. Strings, brass, and woodwind. Volume 4 has a weird folder structure. Many things are in the wrong folders. You've got things like brass samples in a string folder. Some absolutely beautiful, wonderful French horn samples are in this particular folder. So it's a folder with a very memorable name. It's STRTIDE 10 STRHZ horns 1%. Did you get that? That's nice and clear and well titled, isn't it? There's a perfectly well named directory, I think. Were you telling me that's not a simple name? Are you telling me that's a confusing name that doesn't make any sense? Well, I don't know what to tell you. That's a fine name. I'm gonna name my cats that, so then I can, when I go to the vet, the nurse will, or the veterinarian will call out, is there a Baroque here for STRTIDE 10 STRHZ horns 1%? And I'll be like, Ayo, I'm right here, and it'll be great, epic, and I don't know, tubular or something. Because remember, we're in the 90s. if the background still represents the 90s, because I have no idea I don't know what's here. This is just a green screen for me. This is just green. I don't know what you're seeing. I can't see it. You can. I can't. But you can. So, these particular samples, these French horns I'm talking about, you may have already guessed, are exactly what we hear all over Power Rangers, starting with Zer's work on Lightspeed Rescue, then both from Rosner and Zer on Time Force, and then with just Rosner for his solo score on Wild Force. But why does this sketchy CD have such good samples? And how the hell did Rosner and Zer afford it? I mean, it's probably safe to say that Saban wasn't buying it for them. So how did two smaller composers afford such sounds? Actually, with relative ease. It wasn't an official Roland release at all, rather it was a bootleg product. So Zer probably paid $20 from Shifty Samuel down an alley near his favourite pizza joint in LA, went there for the house special and left with an orchestra and a jewel case. Not a bad deal. You know, and just remember that the best thing out there at the time, like Miroslav Vitusa samples and Peter Seidler Orchestra, these were costing multiple thousands, and we're talking about some bootleg CD that somebody got for $20. Like, wow. So we know that Enon Zer and Leo Rosner got this CD from Shifty Samuel. But where did Shifty Samuel get these sounds from? Do they exist in another library from the era? No, they don't. As I said, I've looked through hundreds and they're nowhere. They don't exist. They're exclusive to Roland LA Composer Volume 4. Now let's think about the title of the CD. Roland LA Composer. Roland comes from the fact that these samples included mostly Roland Akai format content from, you know, old Roland discs like Roland String Masters, Roland Orchestral Family, those sorts of things. But why is it called LA Composer? Why? Now we have our fun little. I've got a story to tell you. I've got a bit of an interesting one. You're gonna enjoy this. Let me tell you the story. Let me tell you the story about how my life got flipped, turned upside down. I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there, and I'm going to tell you the story about how I got a weird crush/fixation on Prince Olympius. Anyway, let's continue. So, gather around. Once upon a time, there was a little composer. We're not doing it like this. There was a composer who had just finished scoring his first huge, massive, big, epic Hollywood movie. And great, he had made it wonderful. But there was a little problem. He was getting calls left, right, and centre from major Hollywood directors to come and score their films. Now, this guy was brand new, you know, and now he was part of the pack now, you know, he was part of the Hollywood pack. He now was competing with the likes of John Williams. Ooh, not a competition I'd like to have. What was going to set him apart? Well, an important part of your work as a film composer is creating what you call a MIDI mock-up. This is a process in which you create a draft of your score in software with sample-based orchestral libraries to give the director a rough idea of what it is you're going for before it is actually recorded with a real orchestra. So as we've discussed, the best library around at the time was Peter Sedlacek's Advanced Orchestra, or maybe Miroslav Vitous's Sample-y doofers. And as you heard earlier, they weren't fantastic. So when you created your sort of demo of the score with those, even if the music's great, the sound is going to be horrible. And unless the director can really imagine how that is going to translate and how that's going to actually sound with a real orchestra, they're not going to like your music. So our composer had to make a move. He travels to... brace yourselves for the big scary word. He travels to London. London. He travels to London and he hires the London Symphony Orchestra, the same orchestra behind basically all of the big John Williams scores. They did Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Harry Potter, all sorts of things, So he travels to London and hires probably the best film orchestra ever to record his own private sample library in Air Lyndhurst, also in London, which is the hall that I know the first 4 Harry Potter movies were scored in. It's a very lush sort of sounding hall. It's a hall where a product I use, Spitfire Symphony Orchestra, was recorded. It is maybe a bit more dramatic and echoey than other halls, I guess is a way to explain it. Now, our composer had a very clear vision of what he wanted, for the sound he wanted to capture. So he was doing things like having the mic down on the ground whilst having French horns, maybe 4 on either balcony or more, and they'll record up there while the mic's capturing from below, so you're almost capturing them from further away, so you kind of get like this complete room sound in with your recording. So, crazy big sound. The result was an insanely large library of basically dozens of recordings of every single note on every single instrument, recorded at 10 different what we call dynamic layers. So you'll record them very, very, very soft, very, very soft, very soft, soft, quite loud, loud, very loud, very, very loud, very, very, very loud, and however many of those to get to the number 10. I don't know, I lost count when I lost count on 2. Thinking's hard. Smooth brain. Oh, yeah, and also like multiple recordings of every single note at each volume, so that if you play the note over and over and over again, it doesn't sound like the broken record effect, right? Or they call it the machine gun effect, where it sounds like the same exact clip playing over and over and over, and within about half a second you can tell something's wrong. It doesn't sound good. Whereas if you've got round robins, like these multiple recordings of each note, then it's going to cycle through 8 different recordings, so then by the time you get to the 8th one, you've forgotten what the first one sounded like. Now with modern sample libraries, that's just the norm. But as per the background, which probably is different now, this is still the 1990s, okay? This is still the 90s. This wasn't done. It is done today. Back then it wasn't done. So he had a big problem now. He had like probably terabytes of sample data in the 90s. Giga Studio wasn't going to handle it. Sample Cell absolutely wasn't going to handle it. Like, nothing was going to handle that. So yeah, he had a big problem. So what he actually did, apparently, was hired a development team, software developers, to basically create a software sampler that could a 64-bit software sampler that could deal with this monstrosity of sample data he had recorded with London Symphony Orchestra. So for years, this was his absolute pride and joy. This was his baby. It was the best sounding thing ever. And when directors walked into his studio, they didn't hear dodgy Peter Sedlacek or Miroslav Vitu samples. They heard the London Symphony Orchestra playing in Air Lyndhurst. You know, this is the hall and the players of John Williams. That's what they heard coming from his monitors. And as you probably guessed, he got hired a lot. Who on earth could compete with that? Needless to say, the smaller composers were rather jealous of him and his super secret sample library. So, what happened? One day, allegedly, an intern working in his studio copied an unknown amount of sample data and smuggled it out. Now that sample data would find its way onto, you guessed it, Roland LA Composer Volume 4. So there's only one more question really, isn't there? Who is the LA composer whose samples were stolen from him and put onto this weird bootleg CD? Who is he? Well, let's have a think, right? Who had the time and money to record the best film orchestra in the world in one of the best scoring halls in the world? Who also would put so much emphasis into creating ridiculously over-the-top French horn sections? Maybe some of you are starting to see where I'm going with this. So let's go back to that lovely, memorable folder name that I'm sure you all remembered because it was so short and easy to remember. That would, of course you remember it. You know, STRTIDE 10, STRHZ horns 1%. That one, that folder, yeah, that wonderful folder. Why don't we break it down? STR means strings, which is of course an error, as I mentioned, and it should have been, I guess, BRS for brass. TIDE, I don't know. I don't bloody know what that means. It probably means something to someone somewhere, but it means nothing to me, and that's just... who knows? It's on all of them. I don't know what it means. 10. What does 10 mean? Well, it's STRTID 10 because in that particular directory it is, you know, the subdirectories are 01, 02, 03, 04, blah, 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 up to 10, and this is 10. Horns, that means horns, French horns. Yep, pretty self-explanatory, but did we miss something? Oh yeah, HZ. What does that mean? Hertz? No. No. HZ. Los Angeles. Film scoring. Hollywood. Dramatic French horns. HZ. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to guess who the LA composer was. It's like... You got it? Have you got it?
Ooh, it's a bit of a dodgy question here.
Hans Zimmer. Yes, the Hans Zimmer. Like the Hans Zimmer. The man behind Inception, Lion King, the Dark Knight trilogy, Interstellar, Dune, Dunkirk, and many more which escape me at this time, but probably the current biggest name in Hollywood for film scores, right? Hans Zimmer. This man had his private This man had his private brass samples stolen by some unknown intern and sold on a sketchy bootleg CD, which eventually found its way into the hands of Leo Rosner and Inon Zur. What the And so that is why the Power Rangers OST sounds so good, because in a way, in a sense, the soundtrack was kind of co-produced by Hans Zimmer, and, well, do you want to know who else happens to have a copy of Roland LA Composer? Who could possibly have a copy of Roland LA Composer? Who could it be? Who could it be? Who could it be? Who could it be? Moi? Yes, only the best dear of all time. I have a copy of Roland LA Composer. I've got access to every single orchestral sample Leo Rosner and Inon Zur were using. I have one question for you. Going forward, now that you know I've got access to the original orchestral samples used by Rosner and Zur, do I A, keep using my more modern sample libraries, East West, Hollywood Orchestra, Cineberg, these kind of things, as I have been for the past 10 years? Or B, do I start using the OG samples, Roland LA Composer, meaning I can be almost 100% accurate to the original in my remakes? Comparison time, because you should hear the difference. The track I have the most problems with from my remakes, Rancic's Last Stand. Let's hear it first with East West Hollywood Orchestra and Cineberg, which is my current remake on the channel, with modern sample libraries. Great, right? But it just feels weak compared to the original. I just can't help but feel that it doesn't cut it. It doesn't satisfy me. It feels incomplete to me. It just doesn't feel good enough. It sounds more realistic, sure, but it's lacking something, you know? But hear me out. Here's Rancic's Last Stand, or let me just preface this by saying this is a very sort of rushed kind of demo where I've just converted everything. I've only done a little bit of mixing, so the final result would sound better, don't worry. Again, I forgot to mention, but like the previous one, I've cut the percussion out of all of these just to focus on the strings, brass and woodwind, because they're like the main part I have a problem with. So here's Rancic's Last Stand with Roland LA Composer, co-produced by Hans Zimmer. yes, hell yes, hell yes, hell yes, hell yes. Over the top brass, over the top strings, and identical samples to the original, even if I haven't quite perfected the mix yet. But oh, they're so good, they're so good, they're so good, they're so good. And I know, they're a little bit less realistic. But you can't deny like how much power they have. So I'm going to give you 2 more demos. Firstly, we're going to do a portion from the sort of ending of The End of Time Part 2 with some modern samples, the current remake of mine. Terrific, cool, but not perfect. And with Roland LA Composer. Now how about my guilty pleasure of Inonza's like Time Force fanfare from The End of Time Part 3 with my modern sounding sample remake? This is why I hate it. Do you not hear like the strings, like just those sort of, you know, the shorter bits? Like, it's just not it, you know? But Roland LA Composer, the original samples, again, bit bad mix at the moment, but deal with me. Bear with me. We words. Just hear me out. Listen to this. Absolute maestro. What you gotta understand is, even if they're not as realistic, this is why we all have some weird obsession with this soundtrack. Because of these samples, they make it unique to almost everything else of the era, because not many people had these samples. But I'm very glad that the little dodgy intern did steal those samples from Hans Zimmer, because it gave us such good music. So finally, we come to the end of my ramble. So that is the question for you guys. Are we sticking with the orchestral samples I've been using for a decade now? East West Hollywood Orchestra, Cineperk, all those things. Or are we going to treat ourselves to using the original samples the Rosner and Inonza were using? So let me just break this down, like what this actually means for me. Like, I know what I'd pick, and it would be the OG samples any day. It would be Roland LA Composer, 100%. for a few reasons. One, because it sounds exactly like it does in the show out of the box with much less effort on my part, so I can make remakes so much faster. Secondly, because, I mean, it's tiny in comparison, so like projects will load in a second rather than 5 minutes. Exporting will take 10 seconds rather than 10 minutes. This sort of thing. Not only that, but a little known, I suppose, thing that I do is this. When there is a track I'm remaking, let's take the Wild Force prologue sequence. The flutes at the start, right? Those flutes at the start, I did not previously own. So what I had to do is kind of go out of my way to spend, I think, £99 on them. And for Wes versus the Cyclobots, I had to spend, I needed more percussion. I had to spend about 300 or so on percussion. I had to spend about 150-ish pounds on a organ library, so it's a labour of love, but it also costs a lot of money. Like, if there's a particular sound I need for a project, I'm gonna basically have to fork out a bunch of money for it. Whereas with this, it's like free and I've got it and the samples are all in there. All of the weird sounding flutes and all the weird percussion. Yeah, it saves me a lot of money, which is also something I'm very interested in. I like not having to pay several £100s every time I want to make a new track. I really like that. So yeah, it's easier to run. Well, now I've got it, it's free, so I never have to pay another penny, and it is the original. It is exactly what they were using, so we're gonna get... The only limitation now is how well I can hear it and accurately sort of do the mix, or how much I want to slightly change the mix to maybe add a little bit of variety in there. So, you know, I think this is an absolute win. So, this is what I was talking about, the the illusion of choice thing, because I may or may not have already decided, but I want to hear your thoughts anyway. But come on, I mean, it's a choice of basically getting a copy that doesn't really... or getting, like, basically, literally the original. We want the original, you know. So, let me know in the comments. Take care. Have a good day, have a good night, or have a good afternoon. Maybe a good sort of evening, or have a good state of timelessness in the void. Whatever, and goodbye.